Well, guys, it's been weeks of anticipation to get a brand new X-Men cartoon. Me, as an avid X-Men fan, and just finally wanting to get something new out of the X-Men, and this revival of one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite cartoons of all time, has finally come out. And, well, I'm sorry to say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And oh my goodness, there were so many things that I thought were going against the show. You guys need to understand. I have been let down by Disney so many times, getting my hopes up for something new that they were going to do and then just being let down over and over again. The last thing I let myself get my hopes up on was Wish, and I was let down with that as well. So even though the trailer for X-Men 97 looked good, I was like, nope, having none of it. It's probably not going to be good. I can't trust Disney. I can't look like a fool and have them let me down again. And so I wasn't going to. And then you had Bo DeMeo, the head writer of the show, getting fired just before it was about to be released, and that didn't go well. So I think I did a post about how, well, there goes my hope for the show. But the promotional material still looked good. So we finally got to the premiere, and it's really good. Like, it's actually a really good show. Of course, here's the thing. Usually with Disney Plus premieres, the premiere's usually good, and then it goes downhill from there. But even still, this premiere is really good. This is probably the best thing that I've seen from Disney Plus. I am so pleasantly surprised. Now, are there flaws with the show? Yes, there are, and we will talk about those. But I would say, like, I guarantee there's going to be people out there who are going to nitpick things and make this sound like it's the worst thing ever. It absolutely is not. There is so much to appreciate about this show, but listen to me now and I'll explain to you how this show works. First of all, this show was obviously made by X-Men fans. The people who are working on this show obviously know the storylines that they're picking from, and they're making informed decisions with those. Do I agree with all of them? No, and we'll talk about it, but otherwise, you can tell this is made by people who know these characters and know where they've been in the past and have ideas of where to go with them. And major storylines are being adapted and minor storylines are being adapted, mainly from the 90s and 80s comics of X-Men. And so it's really exciting to watch. This is a show that is made with the fans in mind. But I want to talk about the overarching thing that I really loved about this show. So I'm a big fan of animation, and I've watched like every Marvel animation cartoon, but Marvel animation particularly has gone downhill for like a decade, more than a decade. The last good show we had was 2010's Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and that was kind of the last remnant of a bygone era of superhero animation where you used to have mature storytelling, you used to have characters with actual depth and dimension who actually sounded like people. After that, Disney took over and started spewing out a lot of stuff like Avengers Assemble and just Spider-Man cartoons, just stuff with the cheapest animation that you've ever seen. We're going to talk about the animation in a minute. And it just looked awful. The storytelling was not allowed to have any development or depth whatsoever. And so that's why I am so excited to see X-Men 97 be a show that is attempting to be a mature cartoon. And, it doesn't have to, it's kind of like animation for superhero media regressed, especially in terms of Marvel, back to where it was all shallow storytelling with bad animation. But this is back to the mature storytelling that we used to get with this stuff. And that is what is the most exciting for me. It is slightly more adult than the original show. By that I mean adult. It just like you probably couldn't have a childbirth scene in the original X-Men 92 cartoon, but you get that here. So in that sense, it is not adult in that there's anything inappropriate in it, but adult in the sense that you can tell that they're going further with storylines and that they're with the emotional trauma of the characters and some of the areas that they're going to go. There is just some great character stuff here that they are doing. The show mainly focuses on Jean and Scott, and Jean, if it's really Jean, feeling like maybe she and Scott should try living a normal life and what that would look like, and Scott eventually having to leave the team to Magneto as they are leaving. And so there's a lot of talk there about should they go off to a normal life? Is Scott able to let this go? What were Xavier's intentions before he left? And there's a lot of great character work there. The thing about this show is, though, it didn't need to be a continuation of X-Men 92. And apart from various callbacks and the character lineup, it didn't really feel like it was, if that makes sense. Like, there's no replicating the X-Men 92 show. They weren't able to replicate its tone, in my opinion, or anything like that. And that's not saying it as a negative thing, just that this show feels like it was made in the modern day. It feels like its own thing, and that's fine. And I was just, it did cross my mind while watching it, is why wasn't this just its own show? Like, you could have just made a brand new X-Men cartoon, and the answer is they wanted the 92 recognition. They wanted to get all the old fans in there. And, you know, it's neither here nor there. I don't really see this as a direct continuation of the first series. I just see it as more of a spin-off. It goes into areas that I don't think that show would have gone, and make some decisions that show wouldn't have done. But it's still really great on its own right. So the first episode was a little bare with the storytelling. It was mainly about Scott and Jean figuring out their life and these characters figuring out their place and, you know, getting a lot of action and just setting up the new status quo of the world, that they're trying to accept mutants now, but there's still a lot of opposition. And then the second episode is all about Magneto being embraced by the X-Men and him proving himself that he's really changed. And that was a little bit more tight. And you get a lot of fun moments. Like, I just thought the interactions between Wolverine and Jean were really fun, where he's not having anything from Cyclops, he's not listening to him, but one look from Jean makes him listen, where Jean is about to give birth, and somebody says, well, what if we have to, they're not letting Jean in, and the guy's like, well, what if we have to perform a C-section with her mutant powers? We can't do that. And Wolverine is like, I'll perform a C-section, and it was hilarious. Anyway, there is a little bit of that. There is a little bit of the wittiness of the original show in here, and so that was good. But once again, I'm saying that it's mostly its own thing. They are doing really interesting things with Storm. They are adapting her life-death story arc from the comics. Once again, you can tell that these people read the comics, and I really like that, the turmoil that this woman is going through as she's lost her abilities, because honestly, Storm in the cartoons never gets a lot. They never really use her as much, more than the character who just makes big and broad announcements about her powers. And so I really like that they are doing a human storyline with her and where that's gonna go. Allison Seeley Smith, by the way, she is one of the people who is returning from the old show, and she sounds like she has not aged a day. She is by far the voice actress who has held up all this time, and she conveys a lot of heart in her performance, so I think I liked her the best. The new person that they got to play Cyclops sounds almost just like Norm Macdonald, who passed away, but he was just incredible mimicry of that performance. Other characters did sound different, like Gambit and Jean do sound a little bit different than their original voice actors. They're good voices on their own, they just sound a little bit different, which is, again, is me saying that you could have just made this your own thing. Rogue, I was honestly a bit disappointed with her voice, because Lenore Zan was one of the few actors they chose to keep from the original, and I'm not saying this to be mean, it's just the way it is. People get older, you can visibly, very audibly hear that Lenore Zan's voice has changed, and it sounds like her current age, so that bothered me a little bit. I know that Rogue is a very hard voice to cast, but it just did sound a little odd to me. But other than that, like a very, very enjoyable show. The animation, I'm not bothered by it like other people are. The only time when the animation bothered me is in the opening, and I realized what the problem was, that apparently with the animation team behind this show, they said that they were trying to mimic some of the flaws of the original show, and that did not work, because I'm like, you should not be trying to mimic flaws. You cannot mimic flaws and give it the same charm. So there was a lot of especially jagged animation in the opening titles, and yeah, it does look kind of jagged and cheap as you watch the show. I wasn't really bothered by it, honestly. I know that there's going to be a lot of people yelling about it. I was just fine with it. Going into other parts of the show, we got Roberto DaCosta, who is Sunspot from the comics, who is introduced, and I really liked his character. I like the relationship that they're setting up between him and Jubilee. I like Jubilee a lot in this show, and I think that they really nailed her personality, and so I think it's going to be very enjoyable going forward. We didn't get a lot of character development from the other characters apart from, Jean, Scott, Logan, Magneto. We didn't get a lot of scenes with them. But they are adapting, and this was not in the original show, and once again, this is something that is a bit different and means that it also feels like it's a bit in its own continuity. But they're doing the Magneto, Rogue, Gambit love triangle, and that, once again, was not in the original cartoon. I don't think that Rogue and Magneto even really interacted in the original one. I am not a fan of the Rogue and Magneto relationship in any sense of the word that they have ever tried it in the comics. Let me explain to you guys, and I guarantee that there's going to be people who haven't read the comics who think it's out of nowhere. Let me explain what happened. In the late 80s, there was an arc called The Savage Land where Rogue is fighting with the Carol Danvers personality, and Magneto destroys Carol Danvers, and Rogue is depowered. And there's merely a flirtation in that series. Once again, I've never liked the relationship because I've never gotten any chemistry between the characters, and Magneto is old enough to be Rogue's grandfather. I'm sorry, it's true. Anyway, so it was just more like a flirtation that they would remind the audience of in the 90s, but it really never amounted to much. And then in like the late 90s, they created a character who was absolutely terrible, who was like a de-aged clone of Magneto named Joseph, and he became a part of the X-Men, and they did this love triangle between him, Rogue, and Gambit, where Joseph is able to touch Rogue because of his magnetism powers, and then that creates tension there. Then they forgot about the relationship again, and then they did it again in the late 2000s with Rogue getting her powers back. She's running from Gambit, and Magneto is kind of just, infringing her boundaries. And they just had no chemistry in that arc whatsoever. Like, these characters, like, here's the problem, is you have to have Rogue in her constant empathy mode, in order to get this relationship to work, because otherwise it's like, I can't see these characters, what these characters do for fun. I can't see them being in a legitimate relationship. You just have to constantly keep Rogue in empathy mode to convince anything of this as legitimate. So I've never liked that relationship, but in the show it seems that they're doing something interesting with it. They're building up the idea that Rogue and Gambit are this thing, but Magneto, because of his powers, once again, like the Joseph arc I explained, is the only one who can actually touch Rogue. So I think that there's going to be something interesting there that they're going to say. And, when we talk about X-Men Legacy, the relationship between Magneto and Rogue, which did not work out at all, only strengthened the Gambit relationship and actually had some of his best moments there because, while Magneto is infringing on her boundaries, Gambit is just letting her figure out herself. So the showrunners have kind of confirmed that's what they're doing, so let's see where it goes. And once again, this is an example of how the writers know the comics. They're going from the 80s and 90s comics, they're taking storylines from there, and that's also the case of this Madeline Pryor situation that we're going to get, where everyone knows Madeline Pryor was actually like this clone of Jean Scott, married and then divorced to be with Jean again, and then Madeline Pryor was actually a creation of Sinister. So we've got that big tease at the end of the second episode, and I'm really curious to see where it goes. Because there were some moments in the show where Jean seemed a little off. Now, is that because the writers made some mistakes, or is it because it's not really the real Jean? And I think that that's going to be really interesting. We've got Baby Cable coming in the show, and I just think that overall it's a smart show, and that there's a lot of things to do with it. The one thing I'm concerned of going forward is that there's going to be so much going on with the characters of Jean and Cyclops and all of that other characters aren't going to get much time. For example, I completely forgot Bishop was even in this show because he was barely even there, and I think that there might be a case of having too many characters in the show to start off with. Bishop got like nothing. He just got a couple of lines. I think he even disappeared in some scenes, and there's not even an explanation of why he's currently on the team. Once again, why it's kind of its own thing. And I would like to make one last comment, though. Before this show came out, there was a huge uproar about the character of Morph being non-binary, and I think it's funny that there was such an uproar about it because they make no mention of that in the show whatsoever. And I had my suspicions of that when the creator was like, well, we see non-binary as the same word for shapeshifter. And it's like, yeah, you guys were just saying stuff to like get articles about yourself. Like there was this huge controversy and people say, oh, the show is wrecked. And it's like, they don't even bring it up in the show. And I actually like Morph in the show. He has a lot of fun moments. He has a lot of fun moments with Wolverine, and their best friend's relationship is back. And like when he's teasing him as pregnant Jean and as Sabretooth. So I actually like Morph in this show. But that is my review for X-Men 97. I don't expect this to get a whole lot of views, so I won't review the subsequent episodes. I will do a series review when it's all done later, but 8 out of 10 show, would definitely recommend it. Don't let your Disney hate deter you from checking out this show. It's pretty much what I would say X-Men fans would want. So what did you think of X-Men 97, and are you starting to be curious about watching it? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.